The release is, I don't even know how to start. Just give me a second there. Stop that. Okay, ready?
Good.
The information that's required for the claim and the affidavit is the same for everything that you bring to the court. So when we look at it in that form, we know that we have to show the law that gives you the right to do those things, the right over the thing itself, and the right over the individuals that are all participating in that hearing. So when we look at that a little bit deeper, with the release, we're talking about releasing corporate rights, releasing all of the rights, duties, and actions, real and personal. And also, before you can even release those actions, you actually have to release the things you hold as that corporate person, as trustee with only a use for a fee. You have to release those assets. The only way to really release assets is to sell them or give them away to somebody who accepts them. Now, that, as we can see, there's really that's pretty self-explanatory once we get to more understanding of what the releases are for. But when we look at the actual releasing of the corporate person, and people tend to look at, okay, well, that's releasing my citizenship. It's more than releasing a citizenship. It's releasing everything to do with that fiction. So basically, what we have as governments are juristic units. They're body politics. They're a corporation. And when we look at the affidavit and what we have to show, the law that gives you that right, the law that right over that thing. So we dealt with the law over the thing already, because your corporate person will no longer have any more things, because you can't abandon anything that you have in trust. You just can't do it. So you have to transfer that thing to somebody else. So that's what that is for. So the corporate person isn't holding anything in trust and trying to abandon it, which is lawlessness. So the whole point of this is to make sure that we stay within the agreements and terminate them as the agreement states. So when we're looking at the corporate person, and specifically the citizenship, when we look at the equity laws, which is all law that is made by government, that is all a use for a fee. And they only have the right to transfer your citizenship to another municipal jurisdiction. As you can see, I've never found an act of legislation that actually says that they can actually remove a citizenship from an individual acting as trustee in fee simple. Yet there's all kinds of laws that forbidden that make, I should say, person trafficking and things like that illegal, as well even the UN conventions and many other things that basically state that these are free and democratic societies and so on and so forth. So when we're dealing with the corporate release, it's very well with all of this stuff. It's very important to understand that there's huge jurisdictions, and when it comes to quitting a corporation, which is basically what the release is just you quitting as that corporate person. Can a corporation, any corporation, force you to be an employee for that company? So when we're looking at these things, we have to realize that there's two sides to this coin. There's the equity, which is the government side, that doesn't have much authority to grant anything real, but they have jurisdiction for the uses and trust, for the equity, to grant the use of the thing and to exempt certain things. But only certain things can they exempt. Some things they don't even have the authority to exempt. It has to go to the higher courts, which would be the Queen's courts, or the ones in the United States, the ones acting in the same capacity as the Queen's courts. Because all these judges in the English law and municipal corporations all got their authority from the same place, the monarchy. So when we're dealing with each one of these levels, we're looking into the subject matter that the law states it is, not what we believe it is. What is actually written. If you can't find it, doesn't mean it's not there. It means that you haven't found it yet. Because if you can't find something that that gives that authority, you won't be allowed to do it, or they won't be allowed to do it. So the release is kind of the trickiest part of it, because there's not much information in equity that gives the citizen the right to give up the citizenship and terminate the corporate person and live as a natural individual on lands in that same territory of themselves. So when the main things that we have to show with the release is that the corporation can't force you to be an employee, right? So it also brings us to what are all of these groups? They're all based on free and democratic societies. And if we follow the history of law and freedom and so on and so forth, it gives us more information for those three levels that we have to show. You can just butt in at any time, anybody. So specifically the deed of release, would there be an actual government law that states that they have to do it? Or would freedom and the laws governing it be enough?
Everyone's asking the same question.
Anybody hear me?
Yeah, it was breaking up a bit just then. Can you just repeat the last thing you said?
If there is no, I'll try to word it a bit better. If the government can't, if there is no actual government act or statute that says that they can release you and do all these things, but the corporations are restricted from basically slavery and forcing you against your will to be a part of that group, isn't that not the same thing?
Yeah.
So when we look at how the equitable, like the government laws, how it's written, they're blunt on what restricts them on an individual basis. But when we look at a group, they're no longer restricted in that fashion. So when they write the law, they're writing it in a twofold as well, if that makes sense. So they didn't actually write a specific law that says that they have to do these things, but they wrote a whole lot of laws that forbids them from slavery of any kind. See what I'm getting at? So when we always keep these three levels in mind, when we're dealing with any type of action with the court, right? Like with the deed of release, so we look at, well, what info is actually required, right? So with the deed of release, though, we have to prove that. What type of group are we talking about? Well, we're talking about a free and democratic. You notice that "and" in there again, just like law and equity, right? So once we actually start seeing that, when that "and" comes into play, it's telling us a lot more. So when we look at what is actually required for the release of the corporate person, if we start off with let's see, Blackstone Commentaries, Volume 1, Chapter 10, Corporations, the last 3 paragraphs of that chapter, Blackstone goes into how to dissolve and terminate a corporation. Then we also can look at the Bill of Rights 1688, where everybody has been released. The UN declarations, which forbid person trafficking and allows everyone the right to own property, either individually or as a group. I think that's a very interesting one, how they put that into the UN United Nations, which is a law of nations as well, that they actually threw these things in there. So
what's that one again?
The UN declaration, where everyone has the right to own land individually or as a group. Right? And as we can see, English law is owning it as a group, and that's why all the companies are linked together. That's why Canada has to help these third world countries that are a part of the municipal group, because we all have to take, right? It's everybody is given their life estate and trust to all work together. It's just not a level playing field anymore. So we have to, with the deed of release, if we start off with what law allows you to do that thing. Well, since we know that it's this true subject matter jurisdiction and the essence to all law is who owns the lands makes the laws. So by you being a corporate person, you can't own lands. You're forbidden from it. So that would be a very good reason for in your deed of release of why you want to release those duties. Right? And also we have the Magna Carta, right? 1225, Chapter 4, Statute of Westminster II, the writ of Vermeden, the very first remedy to remove the land trust. So we can see that by following Blackstone's commentaries, especially the corporations chapter, and if we look at the footnotes and follow to the next scholars that he quotes, it takes us into the Municipal Corporations Act and so on and so forth. And this is where they get restricted even more. Now, this is the law that forces the individual to do or grant the thing in question. So, without going into the Municipal Corporations Act, we see that by claiming free man status and other things that so many assume to be a different jurisdiction that it is, as in claiming the common law as well, kind of puts you into a position of putting yourself in the wrong jurisdiction. So now you've determined that you are in English law, and now you're saying that you want out of English law, because as we can see, the common law is the law of the land. So whoever owns the land or has the assumed ownership of land creates the law. So that takes us right to the monarchy right off the hop for pretty much everyone on the planet, because everyone's bound by municipal law, which the monarchy themselves created. No one else did. So then so now that we know what the actual subject matter is, that it's actually lands, now we know what area of law to look in that gives you the right over that thing, right? Because we're not talking a name, we're not talking afterbirth, we're not talking anything like it. This is strictly about land and your right to it, nothing else. So with the deed of release, we see that with the deed of release and adding in those 3 levels, and you begin to understand the different capacities of law and what is required for that deed of release and for everything after it. Because there's law written for all of it. Does anybody have any questions?
No, it's covered it pretty well, to be fair, the release. I did notice we've not really done a Q&A or a summary for either the first topic or the release, so I don't know if you want to incorporate one of those. I'm not sure.
That's why I stopped and I asked if anybody had any questions. Does anybody have any questions on the actual claim part and stuff? We'll start there, and if anybody has any questions, then we'll do